we obviously have some demos for data sets. This is a pbi-tools repository. We've got Contoso sales in here, and we can see the entire data set is actually broken out into pbi-tools, into a pbi-tools folder structure. In addition to that, it also happens to reference the sources for the various tables from another GitHub repository. So, you know, the PBIX download from SQL BI basically has a ready-built PBIX file where you have no access to the underlying sources, right? That comes from some SQL server, which only Alberto and Marco own, basically. And you would never be able to do a refresh or to actually change any of the definitions. So what I've done here is I've extracted the data, I've made them available in a public space, and then we've got a data set here that can be built entirely from scratch, including refresh. If we're looking at this, can do it exactly the same way. Copy the URL, go back here, git clone. This one is now done, which means I can cd into dataset DevOps demo, and I can do code dot to open a new VS Code session for this particular repo. There's a lot more going on in this deployment manuscript, which is why I've just collapsed a few items. So we can see one big difference is this is data set rather than report, which basically means we're using the XMLA endpoint. We can also see, I definitely have to make the same change as before. I have to put valid credentials in. So I've got my client ID here. The secret is still available as a local environment variable. And I obviously need to make sure that I'm referencing a workspace that exists. So that's the one we want to go for. There we go. And here you can also see the target environment specifies display name, and basically what will, so this is an expression. So PBI export folder is basically the folder name we're deploying from. So in this case, it would be Contoso sales. And you can see what happens is that it basically takes this name dynamically and it then appends a suffix to it. So we can leave that. That's fine. It's if I do a development deployment, it will basically create Contoso sales dev for me, which is okay. And if we look here, we've got two different data set options: replace parameters and deploy embedded report. So we can see this is a thick report. It contains a model, but it actually also contains various 6 report pages. So with deploy embedded report true, it means that not just am I going to get my XMLA dataset deployed, but I'm also going to get the report. And replace parameters means that everything I specified as a parameter here will be injected into my dataset parameters. So yeah, that's generally what you'd want. And then we've got refresh settings here, and they are enabled. And we're also saying when a new dataset is created, so the very first time a dataset is created, the refresh is not going to be triggered. And I'm going to show you why that is in a second. But for now, I think we're actually good. There's this time, there's nothing else I need to change. So I can pretty much go ahead and do the usual by doing pbi-tools deploy dot. Then I'm referencing control, because that's what the deployment profile is called. And then I'm saying what if, because that's always best practice first time around, just to see that everything can be resolved. And now it's getting access token, that's worked. And now I'm getting some outputs telling me some metadata. Particularly, it's also telling me how dataset parameters are going to be replaced with new values as part of the deployment. It's also confirming that my target workspace does not yet have a dataset with the target name. So if I now run the same thing without the what if, it's gonna connect to the XML point. I've got one because it's a PPU workspace, premium per user. I obviously don't have a premium capacity for demo purposes. And because of the skip new dataset setting, it will not trigger a refresh. I'm going to explain why in a second. There we go. Right, so that's it. I now have my new data set in here. So if I go back to workspace, tool talk 9. Right, so now we've got introducing calculation groups, the one I uploaded earlier, and we've got Contoso sales dev. And we can also see there's actually a report, which is basically the one from our demo folder. If I go in there, I'm going to see the report, but I'm also going to see that there is no data in here because we haven't done a refresh yet, right? That's the one thing that's still pending. And so the reason why I skipped the refresh here is that obviously for Power BI datasets, you're going to need credentials. And there are basically 3 different options here. So one is in an enterprise context, you will generally connect your datasets to an enterprise data gateway, right? And pbi-tools supports that, where you basically specify the gateway GUID as part of your deployment. If you do that, then everything works first time round because your gateway will have those credentials. Now, I don't have a gateway set up here. Now, the latest release of pbi-tools introduced a new feature which allows you to set cloud credentials, but it's very limited at this point. You can only specify username, password credentials. In this particular example, unfortunately, the credentials we need are actually anonymous credentials, and that's not in the tool yet. So what I need to do for now is I need to go in here, go to settings, and I need to take over and then basically specify those credentials using my own username. Because I've connected to those endpoints before, it's not prompting me. It's actually happy with those. One thing that is coming in an upcoming release is for pbi-tools to actually support anonymous credentials as well. So now that I've done that, I can go and rerun this deployment. And because I've specified refresh true, and because this time it is not a new data set, it will actually do the refresh. It will do a full refresh. However, there's very little data behind it. So literally rerunning the deployment will actually give us a fully fledged data set with all the data in it. Shouldn't take very long at all. We can now see the refresh kicks off. We're using a pbi-tools feature called refreshing, which we've done other recordings about previously, which gives us a very detailed log of what's happening. And we also get this table of partitions. So if we look at this in a bit more detail, the one thing that's now different, every single partition of my data set is now showing up in a ready state. Ready means it doesn't not require a refresh. It's got all its data, so everything is as it should be. I didn't look at the output from the after the last deployment, but if I had done so, it would have said no data instead of ready. So there we go. We can see 13 seconds for a full refresh here, which means if I now go back, so this is another of the publicly available demos, allowing us to basically deploy an entire data set from sources into our tenant, into a given workspace, then refresh it and also show that our connected report works.